If you take one step, then you will be a little closer to your dream than if you stay just where you are. Keep that chin held up and fight your battles with your feet, and both where you'll find a path that
Come closer to the stage. Take your seats. Welcome back. Closer to the stage will be more cozy, mysig, or in Danish, hyggelig. Okay. So, how are you feeling? Tired? Yes. Yes. But you learned so much today, yes? Yes. You've been discussing, you've been listening, learning, listening to learn, listening not to respond. So, clickers here. Yeah, clickers here. So, we have just two more things which is connected to learning, and then there is only about partying and playing. So playing will comes with Graham Brown Martin with Lego, and partying comes with wine. There's lots of wine at the end of the session, so do stay here. And we'll even try to get a group photo at the end of the session. So we just have now a very short highlight service for you. So those who have not been able to participate in all sessions, I will invite on stage my colleagues, moderators from the 4 parallel sessions, including myself here. So first up, Vera Heinonen, Citra Director, welcome. Then we have Mika Saarinen from National. Thank you. Yes, please, please, please. Test, test, test. Woohoo! All right. Our great moderators. Then we have Maria Wetterstrand. Yes. Woo! So we just have it's 20 minutes, and then we'll get Graham Brown Martin. We'll do some play and whatever mojo that he offers for us for today, and then we wrap up and mingle. Okay? Are you with me on this? I can't hear you. Good. So, how are you, colleagues? So everyone else watching on stream, welcome back again. And we want to make sure that we share the learnings. Sharing is not just caring, but this is the best way to learn. So why don't we just go from here? So take 3 to 5 minutes and enlighten our audience. What do you feel the 3 best key takeaways were?
Okay, this is a big responsibility and a big chance to say nearly anything. It's quite nice. Well, I think our session was really broad and wide, and it really touched on the different aspects of future of work in a nice way. And maybe I should start with just the fact that I think I felt that we were talking about a new definition of work in a way. Sorry.
Yeah. First of all, just say which session you'll be moderating.
So the session I was moderating was the future of work session. Is that how to keep up and fill the skills need? Yeah, exactly. And so we were really talking about what the future of working life in 2030 is, what the skills needs are, but also what that pathway towards it is, and how can we change the education system into maybe something that we could call a competence system rather, and to meet those skills needs as well. And so I felt that we were not directly addressing the issue of a new definition of what work is really all about, but it was in the background of the discussion all the time. So there was a lot of discussion about what the sense and purpose of work is, how it's connected with the building community, and how it is also connected to people, how it's a people-to-people affair, and how it's linked with learning in that sense. And there were some good questions around the link between work and learning. For example, one question from the audience was about 10 days of learning a year. Isn't that something that every employer should be able to provide? And the way the panel was reacting to that was quite interesting, because it actually turned into a discussion around how is learning present in every day of work. We heard from Adecco that they build a way of working that is based on the agile model of thinking, where every day you reassess what you did yesterday, or you look backwards and you look forward, and you build in learning into 15-minute meeting sessions in the everyday. So there was a sense of a new definition of how work relates to learning, I feel, in part of our discussions. Many here have asked about why do Finns all the time talk about continuous learning? What is this continuous learning? Why are you calling it continuous learning? And so that was the other topic that really came up quite strongly. And to some degree, it's the lifelong learning. It's the issue of lifelong learning. But to some degree, it's not. It's also really the Finnish approach at trying to redefine lifelong learning. We've spoken about lifelong learning for the past 20, 30 years. But if we really want to move ahead with lifelong learning, we need to make it something a little bit different. And so we talked about that, how what does continuous learning in a way mean? I mean, you know, it's about motivating the individuals to learn. It's about getting the right kind of finance, the right kind of division of responsibility between the individual, between the education institutions and the companies. It's about leading learning. It came up in the panel discussion, and I like that term, leading learning. So you actually, you know, have a sense and purpose to the activities. And it's about building the structures around this. So this topic of continuous learning. And then we very little touched on what the actual future skills are.
What could that be? Can you just say 1, 2, 3?
What the future skills are?
Yeah, one short and sweet.
Well, no, I cannot, because actually I was glad that we did not go into the whole discussion on, you know, should we call it transversal skills? Should we call it 21st century skills? Should there be, should it be that, or should it be this? Or what is the list? Does it have 20 points, 25 points, or does it have 30 points? It's really not about that, right? Because if we actually want to move into talking about continuous learning, we also need to move beyond those lists of skills that we need for the future. We need to actually move into thinking in the interconnections between the skills. And that came up quite a bit in the discussion, both in the questions from the audience and in the panel. That the future of skills is not necessarily so that some will go away and some, you know, will come in, and then we need to learn the new skills that come in. It's really about how are they connected in new ways. Okay. So what does service mean to an engineer? Service thinking mean to an engineer? Or what is it when digitalization moves into the hospital and you get, you know, the technology around hospitalization or healthcare and so forth. So these are the questions of the new skills, the interconnection.
So for the sake of the event, thank you, Mika. The definitions of lifelong learning and continuous learning we use today interchangeably. So there are different ways to phrase it, but I should have said it in the beginning. It's used interchangeably, but thank you so much. If we go to your session, Vera, you had a timeout approach to discuss. So you had a continuous learning in changing work environments.
That is correct. And we had, to begin with, we had two fantastic keynote speakers, of which one was Esko Kilpi, he's sitting here at the front row. And the other one was Jane Hart, and I'm afraid she had to leave already.
Okay.
And after our keynote speakers, we went to dialogue mode. We had 3 different streams, and I'm just going to go them through quickly. The first one was, one of the groups discussed how to enable learning together at the workplace. And the second group discussed how to foster motivation to learn. And the third topic was how to recognize competence gained through work and leisure. And we had about an hour or so for the dialogue session, which meant that we sort of we had a wrap up in a fishbowl method. I love these different methods, but just to go back to the timeout session, is really a very constructive and egalitarian way of having a dialogue. So everyone gets to speak, and you're really focusing on listening the other person's.
Radical listening is awesome.
I know the listening is difficult, isn't it? And actually, going from that to the key takeaways, I'm probably not the only one from the session that learned that really we need to listen more in order to really learn from each other. We talk a lot about learning from each other, but it can't happen without the listening bit. And one related idea to that was also that we need to recognize each other's competences and capabilities and really foster that and foster those skills in making that recognition something that we give others more responsibility. So that was one of the takeaways as well. And then one very concrete takeaway was Jane Hart's idea that really continuous learning is something you do every day. Take 20 minutes of your day and focus on something. It takes about 30 days to get into that routine, but at the end it doesn't need to be more difficult than that. And she stated as one example that she spends quite a bit of time on Twitter and looking looking and learning and collaborating.
That's great. I was part of your workshop and I learned a lot. So this sentence, listen to learn, not listen to respond. And think about your capacity. We always are so in a rush with thinking what to reply. So I really felt that that was a very strong key takeaway to boost our own learning through listening.
That's right.
Yeah. Did you have anything?
I think, yes, there's something I wanted to recap. That's something that Esko said, and I rephrase it in a more simple way. He said it in a very elegant way. But really, do engage with people that think differently, because that's, again, that diversity of thought is something that creates something new.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vera. And then we move on to Maria Wetterstrand. You had a very, very tough also session called Boosting Competitiveness Through Innovation and Research. So did you get some interesting insights from your panel?
Yes, I did. I took
She was really bossy there.
I took the opposite approach to this listening, learning and listening. I tried to force the audience to respond rather than only listen and give us comments and thoughts. That was not that successful, but since I forced them, they in the end, they said a few things. But that was quite brilliant. As always, you have the audience, they are thinking a lot of brilliant thoughts, but they are too shy to share with everyone. So thank you for those of you who actually dared to do that. It made the discussion better. Then I had my panel also, of course, that I tried to get their thoughts on this issue of innovation and research boosting competitiveness. And it actually started where you ended, with diversity. We talked a lot about how it's necessary to have diverse groups to be really innovative. And that the best innovations usually come from those environments where you have a clear goal on what you want to achieve, and you have a very diverse team trying together to reach that goal. And I asked them, how diverse can it be? Can it be too diverse? But they didn't want to say that it could be too diverse, as long as you have like a good leadership and a clear goal where you want to get. Then the diversity is only positive from their point of view. So that was quite interesting to hear, I think. So if you want to be an innovative company, for example, you should actually put together people with different backgrounds and different thoughts, different age, different gender, whatever.
Was there any specific concrete example how it could be done to promote diversity at workplaces?
It was not that concrete, but they sort of emphasized it. Okay. So let's believe that
so there's
true.
A strong business case.
Whatever you want to innovate around, you should always have diverse teams, because you will get more ideas from them. So that was one thing. Then I was reflecting quite a lot about this of being human, because we had the AI and robotics. A person from the EU Commission, Juha Heikkilä, that
Yes.
talked about their research into AI and robotics, and he tried to tell us that Europe is doing quite well. We are not as far behind as some people might think, but rather have lots of strengths in this, especially in implementing and using these technologies embedded in different kinds of real applications. And he also talked about how this could affect the future of work. So we actually touched a lot upon these other subjects as well. And he said that we should not be too afraid about that either, because being human is something that only humans can be. So anything to do with sort of not something that cannot be repeated exactly in the same way every time will probably not be replaced by a robot or an AI. So that humans will probably be very necessary in a lot of jobs also in the future. So being human is very good. And it's also quite good to be human because we have the capacity to actually understand the challenges that this planet is going through, and also know how to focus our thoughts and our research money and our efforts to the right things, so that we actually innovate on those challenges that are the most important, which was, in their opinion, climate change, our aging population, and also these new technological developments.
So back to the mega trends and how we could take them into use. Thank you. I think you had some strong representatives there, really, from the commission side, from the business side, and see how also from the civil society, because again, the topic of today is really how to showcase cooperation between the sectors to making these shared challenges visible and how we can come there collectively. So my session was with a lot of focus on universities, education institutions, and also companies, how we are promoting and rebuilding and figuring out which skills are we teaching, and are we teaching the right skills to stay relevant as a university, and to stay relevant as teachers, as professors, and was really honest discussion. So I also appreciate all those who have been active, and also on my panel. So one of the things that we realized, we found out, was that there is a lot of soul searching for universities, regardless which level you are, what is the future of universities, and a lot of focus on hybrid way of universities now to promoting jobs, to promoting links to the job environment, to the business community. I represent Hanken also. I'm there as a consultant, Hanken School of Economics. We have banks, OP Bank, teaching a course. We have a lot of companies doing case studies to really bring in the best from two worlds, from theory to practice, and to give hope and choices. Where can you go with your education? Then there was focus on, that is the example of Haaga-Helia, Teemu Koko said, multidisciplinary approach, and looking at that they wouldn't hire lecturers who don't have a business experience, so that, but still they have to have a year or year and a half pedagogical background to teach. So what are some of the teaching skill and competencies which are needed, and they do teach, is critical thinking, project management, mental well-being. It's really focusing now, and personal leadership. We heard from the Ruuti Helsinki Youth Council today that they're also needing a lot of time management skills, and then very important one we talked about, license to fail. Did you have that about failure? Yeah?
We did.
So it was really important to see, and Teemu Koko, he was so brave. He said, well, this failure is taboo in Finland. So how are we promoting from Sitra if there is a focus on experimentation culture? So, and then that was how you could get license to fail, is to promote experimentation, that you would have that culture, that you allow your students to do some courses. In Haaga-Helia, they wanted to promote a failure course, but they couldn't hire lecturers.
Can I just pitch in?
Yeah.
Because there was this fantastic idea from the group dialogues that we should actually introduce more of a gaming culture into the workplace as well, because when you play a game, you're allowed to lose.
Yeah.
And that would, promote the failing culture in a sense as well.
Yeah.
It's a nice
yeah,
idea.
gaming is definitely in, and then it kind of boosts your motivation because you kind of have a carrot there. You want to win or to fail together.
So you mean the name of the conference is a little bit misleading than Hell We Can, right? It should
Yeah.
be Hell We Fail.
In a way, yes.
And then we
Hell, we
celebrate
can
it,
fail.
huh?
Hell, we can fail, and we're okay with that. Yes. And so, and on that fostering cultural openness, we come back to so many discussions of being human, that AI is there, that these mega trends are there, but we remain human, and that's beautiful connections. Then instead of competing, be your professor in academia or in business environment, that it's much nicer to be vulnerable and share your problems or challenges in the workplace. We had a beautiful professor from Germany saying that, well, in academia, you don't tell your professor colleagues what you do when you're sitting here. So there is competition rather than collaboration, but we want to have a shared prosperity, right? So, and why was this discussion? It was, I mean, all these things that we discussed is because you can't microwave change. That it takes time. So for us, all of us here to really learn and unlearn is we need from our employees and employers or ourselves time to be there. The example was Google gives 20% of the employee time to do what they want, and it was paid for. And the other why is that to be determined to change requires courage, networks, loving kindness, Isko said, and engaging teams, engaged teams in the workplace can achieve much more. Also innovation, also diversity. Managing people, diverse teams is not easy, but we need to have representation, and because we know diversity really works in terms of bringing results and being ambitious as companies. So that was my, my take, and now, if you allow me, we will close this one. I think we have really talked around very similar topics from different angles, and it's great to see that the discussion on collaboration is taking part and coming back to our humanness. So thank you so much for your time and moderating. Thank you. Thanks. So, as the last part of our session, I would very much be happy and honored to invite our speaker, keynote speaker, on Graham Brown Martin. Welcome on stage, and give him a round of applause. Welcome.
I need you to do me a favor before we start. Would you do me a favor? I need you to come to the front, just a little bit. I know it's sitting next to each other and everything else, but we've got a little game that we're going to play, and it's much more fun and much easier for me to play if you're a little bit closer. And you get to know your neighbors, and trust me, it's a good idea before the cocktails.
Yeah.
I also realize I am the one that's standing between you and the cocktails, so better
Graham?
we have some fun. Thank you so much.
Graham, can I steal your 1 minute and we have
Yes.
a common selfie with? Right.
We're going that way.
Yeah.
Oh,
We'll let them
it's
down.
because we're going to do a selfie.
Yes.
Is this my water?
A learning day. Yeah, it's for you. It's for you. So. Okay.
Okay, you have to do like, I think it's a Hollywood thing, isn't it?
Yeah. Say, I think, you know what? No, we're going to do a video, not a picture. We're going to say, hell we can, okay? On 3, 2, 1. Okay? Yes. So, Helsinki, we say 3, 2, 1. Hell we can.
We can.
And one more time. 3, 2, 1.
Hell, we can.
Woohoo! Thank you. You're beautiful.
Give yourself a round of applause. Okay. So thank you so much for inviting me to this event, and thank you for all those that have stayed to the end. I'd like to think that you stayed for me and not the cocktails, but we shall see. First of all, imposter syndrome, bit of a fraud. I'm using this quote really because I think probably the best way to explain my background is that I was homeschooled, but without telling my parents. Okay? Which meant I didn't have a structured education. I left school at 15, I lived in a squat, didn't go to university. I've been to lots of universities and I've lectured at lots of universities, but I didn't have what you would call a formal education. And I think that lack of structure gave me resilience, but it also didn't destroy my curiosity. And so I like this quote from Einstein, of course, and it's true, I don't have any special talents. It's just that I'm constantly curious, and it feeds into what the last panel was talking about when they were talking about continuous learning. It's about being continuously curious. Has anyone here stopped learning? Good, isn't it? It's just the natural state. I don't know why we have to label it. But anyway, we do, of course. Otherwise, we wouldn't get grants. So that was a joke. It's the end of the day, right? So, I described that some of the work that I do as anticipatory research and foresight. If you use a lot of big words, you get more money. But it was because I was opposed to this idea of futurism. Because futurism, and I'm sure you've been to lots of talks where somebody stands and tells you, yes, processors do this, therefore this will happen, and then AI will come along, and then this will happen, and so on. You know that talk, right? But the future isn't a place. It doesn't exist. We have human agency. We have agency. Technology is just another part of human activity. We decide what happens. We can decide what happens. And just because we can do something doesn't always mean we should. So what I tend to do is inform my practice by looking at social, political, economic, and technological trends and try and anticipate what might happen under certain circumstances. So it sounds like I'm being pretentious. It's just that I don't have a crystal ball. No one does. We're just trying to figure out what might happen. That's all we can do, I think. So I sort of sit in that middle bit of trying to figure out what might happen. I also wrote a book, Learning Reimagined, which did quite well and allowed me to travel around the world. I spent time living in refugee camps on the Syrian border, up a mountain after an earthquake in China, into some very poor places, but also some very wealthy places, to get to meet parents, learners, educators, to ask their views on education and whether technology was having any impact at all. Well, what I found was a common theme wherever I was that everybody, teachers, learners, parents, all wanted to understand and know how their children, their learners, were going to thrive in what was going to be a rapidly changing world. And that was a common theme wherever I went. So when I do these talks or in my practice, I often get asked questions about the future. And it's like, well, when organizations have these fast, scalable, affordable access to technology with lower barriers to entry and so forth, will robots take all our jobs? That's a fair question, isn't it? It's been asked a few times today. It's fourth industrial revolution, how are we going to survive that? Will I still be employed? Well, my view is we can have a more optimistic outlook in that with the automation of things, with AI and so forth, humans might have the opportunity to do work that demands their creativity, their imagination, social emotion, intelligence, and so forth, demands their humanity, rather than having education systems or expecting people to be robots, to be machines. Because actually, if we look at the history, we moved people from the field to the factories. Maybe we perhaps didn't want creativity on the production line, or creativity if you're an accountant, although some large corporations exercise a lot of creativity in their tax affairs. But that's a different subject. So what I'm saying is, this is good news. We can automate the work and humanize the jobs. We can nurture human potential and self-actualization. So I would say organizations need to sort of review, how do they survive, employees' potential to assess skills that are less likely to be replaced by machines. So we're thinking about training our employees, our colleagues, and so forth. Let's look at these other, more human skills that historically we've diminished. Back to my earlier point, my curiosity wasn't diminished because I didn't go to school. Now, I know that's a bit rude about schools, but hey, you didn't grow up where I did. So I think employers will need to create a culture that rewards lifelong or continuous learning and celebrates creativity. So, should we play around with this? Should we make something? Yeah? I know it's late, but shall we make something? Yeah. Ah, come on. So my friends here are going to very quickly pass out some Lego. Oh, no, come on, this is terrible. They're going to pass out some Lego. Yeah. Come on. Now, don't open it. Now, I know some of you are teachers and you'll ignore me, but please don't open it because you'll spoil the game. And if there isn't one each, you'll have to share with your neighbour. I managed to sort of smuggle these through customs. Contraband Lego. Don't open it. I can see some of you have already opened it. Are you a teacher? Okay, now stand up. Okay. If you haven't got Lego, put your hand up just so that the wonderful people here can make sure you get some. Lady over here doesn't have one. One each. Someone's got two. If you've got two, pass it on to someone who hasn't got one. Quicker we do this, quicker we can have drinks. Okay, has everyone got some Lego? Yes? Anyone not got any? Fantastic, thank you guys. Okay, so don't open it yet. When I say go, and it's not that go, it's the next go, but not this one. Wait. Okay. Right, these are the rules. This is a very small number of rules. You have 90 seconds, and you've got to use every piece in the pack, which you haven't opened yet, apart from the lady there, and you've got to make a duck. Okay? Everyone understand the rules? Use every piece and make a duck, and you've got 90 seconds. Are you ready? Yes. Go. One minute. Seconds. We do the countdown. Should we do the countdown together? 10. 9. Stop. Woo! Okay. How did you get on? Great. Yeah, everyone had fun? Right, 5 people to come up here. Don't worry, it's not invasive. Can I have 5 volunteers just to come up and show their duck? 1 here, somebody else come up. 1 here. Can we get a mix, not just all boys? Yeah. I mean, we don't have to have 5. We can have as many of you like. We can have all up here if you like. Okay, if you can come up to the front here. Thereabouts, so that the camera can see you, because you're on telly. Say hello, Mum. Hello, Mum. Come on up to the front, in a line, that'd be great, some kind of line. Right, could you hold your duck up? Right. Okay, can somebody tell me which is the right one? Who got the right answer? Okay, hold up your own ducks. Now look around at look at everyone's ducks. Yeah? Can anyone tell me who's got the right duck? Who got the right answer? Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you. Can you applaud our volunteers? Now, of course, this is a very basic psychology test, but there is no right answer. You know, it was very simple, wasn't it? It was use all the pieces, create a duck, and it was your version of the duck, and we are all creatively unique, okay? And yet we operate traditionally in an education system where there's only one right answer. Now, can you imagine if this game was to have all of you just do one duck, and it had to be this particular duck? We'd all be bored. You know, in the UK, I don't know whether you have a version of it over here, we have the Great British Bake Off, where you have the same basic ingredients and you have to make something, you know, make a cake or something like that. The entertainment, of course, is the variety. But could you imagine if someone had tried to change the format of that TV show and said, you all have to make an identical cupcake? I mean, do you think you would tune in next week to see them all making an identical Victoria sponge cake? Or a muffin? Of course you wouldn't. Boring. But the point is we all used our unique creativity, every single one of you, and you created a duck, your version of a duck, and they were probably all different. I've done this experiment many times, and very rarely do you get two ducks the same. So my point is what do we value? Do we value everyone being the same, or do we value difference? Do we value creativity? Do we value critical thinking? It was interesting watching you, and we'll come to this throughout the rest of the talk, about how you did it. Some of you went straight for it. Boom, duck, yes. Some of you built it, took it apart, built it again, had a look, looked at what your mates were doing, and then built it. Yeah? Do you know which one you were? Yeah? We'll come back to that. Hold on to that. Thing is, how we see things affects our creativity and our ability to innovate, doesn't it? The way we look at things. And we all look at things slightly differently. So we play with this. Yeah? So, who can see the tree? Hands up. Who can see the tree? Come on, don't be shy. Drinks time soon. Who can see the baby? Who can't see the baby? Okay, can the person who can see the baby tell the person who can't see the baby where the baby is? Yeah? Help me out here, come on. Yeah, you can see it now? Can everyone see it? Rah. Yeah? The problem is, once you can see the baby, you can't unsee it. Okay, this is an old one, right? Yeah? Who sees the old lady? Who sees the young lady? Who sees both? Anyone not see the old lady? Okay, so it's an old one, but it's a goodie. And of course, this is just some dolphins, because I like dolphins. So why are you laughing? It's dolphins. So how we see things affects how we innovate, and it helps us to innovate. And the point we keep hearing throughout the sessions that I've been in is about diversity, where we come from, social and cultural diversity, our backgrounds, because it helps us see things differently. Innovation can only thrive with diversity. No diversity, no innovation. If you have a single type of education system that only produces groupthink, you lose innovation. It is as simple as that. Let me explain in this short video coming up.
What is innovation? Life is made up of dots. Many, in fact most people, believe that the dots they see every day are all the dots there are. So life goes along according to these known dots. Decisions and solutions are based on these commonly known dots, as well as many conclusions too. Some companies build their entire businesses on these known dots. This we know as the status quo, business as usual. Then one day, someone comes along and sees one or more dots beyond the commonly agreed upon dots. Dots that others missed, dots that are ignored, dots that others have long since forgotten about. Some like these new dots and celebrate this new discovery, liking how things currently are and comfortable with everyday dots. Some protest these new dots. Some even claim they are invalid, or worse, are imaginary dots that don't even exist. Yet, It's these new dots that potentially change everything. What is the source of these new dots? Notions. Unexpected connections. Ideas. Possibilities. And imagination. Fire was one of these dots. So was the wheel. And the bicycle. And the automobile. And the computer, as well as the internet, the smartphone, and the tablet. In fact, many of today's common dots were at one time uncommon, newly introduced dots. So what is innovation? Those other dots, the ones others miss, and having the certainty to know that the dots you see are not only valid, but necessary if the world is to move forward.
So, of course, what I've done there is I've subliminally hypnotized you, and you're in my power. The point I'm trying to make there is it's just joining up the dots, isn't it? It's connecting particularly interdisciplinary dots, multidisciplinary dots. And yet, from school to university, we rarely de-silo. So we only see certain types of dots. And that isn't going to help us innovate. We need diversity, and we need diversity, and we need to change within our education system. So we're going to come to this in a second, how we might do that. This guy, I didn't agree with everything he said. Some of it was a bit nuts. But I did agree with this, and it's an old quote, and it's a bit of a cliche, and it's been mentioned a few times, or different versions of it. And he was talking it was not suggesting that reading and writing and numeracy and so forth wasn't important. That's a given. Okay, it should be. I know there were some quite startling figures this morning about lack of literacy. But let's assume that's a given. But this notion of being able to learn and unlearn and relearn, you know, the single biggest skill that you should be able to leave education, and I use that word advisedly because education, teaching, and learning are three separate, often mutually exclusive things. But if we think about education, what we want is to output self-actualized, autonomous learners, people who can continue to learn. Because if we want to believe that statistic from World Economic Forum, which I dispute, by the way, but if we want to believe 65%, blah, 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 then it means that all of us are going to face jobs and situations that we don't know how to do. So what are we going to do? Read a book, go on YouTube, but we're going to use a combination of techniques to learn how to do it. And that includes, what some people call soft skills, I call enterprise skills, which is about collaboration, critical thinking, creativity, working together to solve a problem. And we've got lots of problems to solve. In fact, we have more problems in this century than at any point in the history of our species. And I'm going to come to that shortly. So, of course, we're on the precipice of what the World Economic Forum and other organizations, and indeed myself 15 years ago, calls the fourth industrial revolution, characterized by AI and automation and self-driving cars and neurobrain electronic transplants and all that stuff that's going on. I mean, this is a fantastic time to be alive. Some exciting things, perhaps solutions to global challenges. It's also terrifying, isn't it? Because we do dumb stuff. We have a tendency, we split the atom and then vaporize 250,000 people. There's countries, including my own, that think autonomous weapons is a good idea. What could possibly go wrong? So new opportunities and new challenges. Some of the new challenges around technological unemployment, of course. We'll come to that. Existential challenges. Now, we know these are real. I'm talking about climate change. I'm talking about population growth. I'm talking about antibiotic resistance. I'm talking about us doing dumb stuff and all those things. These are real. We can debate the reason for them and whatever, but they are happening. And these are the biggest challenges that our species have ever faced. Let me go into that in more detail. So I did a bit of work with in the launch of the Global STEM Alliance and the United Nations back in 2014 and started looking at data sets, many of them, and just crunching them all up. Now, I created this sort of map here where the darker the brown, and this is all based on things like geographical location, investment in education, investment in infrastructure, and a whole bunch of other things. The darker the brown, the less likely those nations will adapt to climate change based on the most optimistic figures. Okay, so this isn't woo-woo kind of dystopia. This is just the most conservative figures. The green, sorry New Zealand, I missed it. The green is most likely to adapt. That doesn't mean, just because we're up there in the green, that we're going to be okay, because we're an interdependent species. You know, a lot of this, you know, your phone, all the stuff in your phone comes from over here. A lot of the food comes from over there. A lot of the oxygen comes from down there. So this is problematic. Very problematic. It becomes more problematic when you look at population growth. You know, by 2050, we're seeing massive growth. By the end of this century, I mean, when I was born, there was 3 billion people on the planet. And I'm not that old. And now there's 7.5 billion. By the end of this century, by the most conservative estimates, there's 11 billion. African continent itself will be 4 billion. It's 1.2 now, it'll be 4 billion. So if I go back, anyone see what's wrong with this picture? Okay. This is going to happen. You know, these are most conservative figures. This is by 2050. And so what we'll see, if these are right, or even close to being right, is that there'll be 1 billion climate change migrants, people fleeing their homes. And now, we got bent out of shape. I say we, I mean, I'm just saying the world got bent out of shape when 4 million souls left Syria. We saw what's happened. 1 billion is nearly 3 times the population of Europe or America. So what are we going to do? It's something that we need to prepare for, isn't it, really? I mean, you know, we can build walls, you know, we can shut borders, you know, we can leave Europe, it's still going to happen. The future of work, of course, will change as a result of these two things. New employment opportunities, yes, of course. And part of what we're here to talk about are what they may be. Technological unemployment should not be ignored, should not be just brushed under the carpet. These platitudes saying, well, there's always been technological change and we've always coped. Well, actually, we haven't. We actually haven't. And we're seeing the result of that not happening now. You know, take the north of England, parts of Europe, the American Rust Belt, and tell them that you'll get new jobs. We moved manufacturing to places where it was cheaper to make things, and we didn't replace those jobs. And our chickens are coming home to roost. I'll explain shortly. I've got a lot of other explaining to do, haven't I? You know, you've seen all these stats from organizations we trust, McKinsey, OECD, et cetera, et cetera. And they all come up with all these sort of things. And we're being sort of vaccinated. Say, oh, don't worry, everything will be fine. Maybe it will, if we invest in education. I think this guy got it right, because he did 2 reports. The first one was wrong. The second one, he goes, actually, it will recover, but it may take generations. And what happens in that time? And why is that happening? Well, it's a logical conclusion of capitalism, isn't it? And I'm not anti. I'm just saying it just is. It's, you know, robots will work for free. You know, humans need other things. And that's where we are. You know, we move people from the field, from craft production. We transform craft production to mass production in the factories. And it makes sense, doesn't it, just to replace the people with a machine. You know, I mean, but it's not just going to be factories. I mean, 60% of keyhole surgery is done or assisted by a telepresence robot. Why? Because the last thing you want to do when you're counting back from 100 is find out that your surgeon went out on a big night the night before. But also accountancy, law, I mean, it's going to be quite an impact. And I think that's a great thing. As I said earlier, I think we can automate the work and humanize the jobs. But what this does in this transition or interregnum, those fans of Gramsci will know, is that we see downward pressure on income security. And when we see downward pressure on income security, like the gig economy, for example, lots of our governments talk about the highest employment figures of all time. What they don't tell you is how many of them are working in the gig economy, or how millennials were lied to. Go to school, get your degree, get your grades, get a good degree at university, and you'll have a job, and so forth. And now we have generation rent. This is a problem. And so we end up with this: 8 men owning half the wealth of the planet. Now, whereas we used to talk about the inhumane nature of work, factories and smoke and noise, we now have to think about the inhumane nature of not working, of not having social agency, of not having a voice in society. And we know what that looks like when that happens. We have what Professor Guy Standing of SOAS calls the rise of the precariat, a social group without income security, lack of social agency, who become politicized. And we're seeing this across the Western world as we speak. Just open the newspapers. And this isn't about the internet. This was, Guy Standing was writing about this in the early noughties, around 2010, and his book was published in 2011. So I think we have to be mindful that was happening before we started seeing the gig economy. And if we're going to start removing large amounts of jobs, and I think we can't put it back in the bottle. We have to be prepared for what might happen if, in the inhumane nature of not working, is my point. It doesn't have to be a dystopia. But education, I think, training, learning, humanizing the jobs has to be part of that. So, we have a problem. We have a little challenge that we have to solve. We are, of course, in this tyranny of experts, futurists, economists, and so forth, been really good at telling you the jobs that will disappear, but they're not very good at telling you the jobs that will emerge. We've been scratching our head all day, haven't we? What are the new jobs going to be? Oh, Instagram influencer. So what are the new jobs that are going to emerge? Will people be appropriately equipped to do those jobs, which is what this day has been about, and whether they'll produce adequate incomes? They're not good at that. The economists and so forth aren't good at that. But being a writer means I can quote myself. And here's a clue. The jobs of the future, the ones that machines can't do. Pretty easy, huh? And how do we know what the machines can do? Well, if it's based on rules, or if it can be measured, it'll be automated. That's just the way it works, folks. So there you go, we're done. No, let's carry on. So Jack Ma was the chairman and co-founder of Alibaba, a very wealthy guy. He's just stepped down from there. He's getting into philanthropy now, as rich people do. But this is what he had to say at the last World Economic Forum, because that's where all the movers and shakers go, apparently.
Education, it's a big challenge now. If we do not change the way we teach, 30 years later we'll be in trouble. Because the way we teach, the thing we teach our kids are the things the past 200 years is knowledge-based. And we cannot teach our kids to compete with machine who is smarter. We have to teach something unique. That is, machine can never catch up with us.
So he's asking questions about what education is for, isn't he, really? And is it to train people to compete with machines? Is that what we want? Because memorization now is kind of obsolete, isn't it? But that's what we do. We use a classic model of education. We fill your head, we inculcate you with facts and procedures, which you vomit out at the particular time. And depending on how well you memorize them, you get a grade, and I get a grade as a teacher or trainer. Now, I've used these 3 images on purpose. And you'll notice something. This was in 1890, this was in 1970 something, and this was about 2 years ago. And of course, they're all the same, aren't they? This one was Classroom of the Future. You've heard that one, right? But it's the same, using 21st century technology to reinforce 19th century practice because we use the same metrics. We're held hostage by the textbook and measurement industry, a multi-billion global industry about scarcity of content, which you have to memorize. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not anti-content. I write books. I want you to buy them. Do you know what I mean? There's nothing wrong with that. But when that is the sole purpose of education, then we have a problem, particularly now when we're outputting people for an industrial economy which does not exist anymore. Or is it to solve challenging problems? Is that what education's for? Is it to solve abstract, interdisciplinary challenges? You know, spoiler, I'm probably on the latter, to be honest. Because we have, as a result of this hijacking of education just purely by textbook and measurement, we end up with a form of education known as instructionism, direct instruction. Now, some direct instruction is actually very useful. I gave you some of that with the duck example, didn't I? But after you did that, you went off and did your thing. But we've got to an education which worked at the end of the 19th century, the beginning of the 20th century, which was all about direct instruction. But it's really teaching to forget. So, 3 people on the stage, and we're going to do quadratic equations. Who's up first? Now, come on, I'll pick you. Right. All of you, how many of you are teachers? All of you, when you went through high school, apart from me because I didn't do the test, would have done quadratic equations, you know, when you were 15, 16 in your sort of high school test. None of you could really remember them. I know you're searching on Google quickly, just in case I pick you. But the point is you don't. And the reason why is, I mean, quadratic equations are very useful, but the reason is because you never applied them. You never made anything with them. You know, you learnt them in a vacuum. You learnt mathematics. I mean, well, they say you learnt mathematics. You learnt calculating at school, because mathematics is far more interesting than calculating. But the point is that you didn't do anything with it. You didn't make anything with it. You didn't stick. And so you have this thing, teaching to forget, which is fine, because as long as you got the test, as long as you know, we all did it. You know, you crammed all that stuff in your head the night before, you did the test, and then you forgot it all, or most of it, as soon as you walked out. Yeah, about right? Is that fair? And then EdTech, educational technology, is just as bad. I mean, not all of it, but a lot of it is. And it's because it's, again, this sort of 21st century technology. So let's give them all iPads. Let's give them all iPads, and then we'll have transformation. But of course you won't. It's a bit like, a friend of mine described this as, it's like if you've got a bad chef who uses bad ingredients, and then you give them a food mixer, does it turn them into a good chef? Right? I'm sorry? You sold your food mixer. Exactly. And the thing is, there's nothing wrong with technology. Don't get me wrong, I'm not anti-technology. My career has been based on technology. But if we just carpet bomb schools and just like, look, here's some whiteboards, here's some iPads, here's some this, and we just do the same thing, it doesn't change anything. It doesn't create transformation. And we need transformation because we need different kinds of, we value new things now for this century, is my point. So you get this sort of digital instructionism, this naive, stupid belief that technocrats and bureaucrats think that you can replace teachers with an AI because they think it's just instruction. And therefore, we have an AI tutor. But it fundamentally misunderstands the nature of teaching and learning, the fact that it's a relationship between two people, where I get to know you. We're here, aren't we? Because we're social animals. That's how we learn. You know, I need to understand more about you. And that's good teachers practice that. And AI will never know enough about you, unfortunately. It's just an AI just looking at your LMS, doesn't know whether you're sick, whether something's happening at home, etc. But the good news, ta-da! There are 3 areas, and there's more, but these are the ones that I picked. You can pick some other ones later. 3 areas where humans beat machines. Creative endeavors. Yes, I'm talking about art and design and all those things, but I'm also talking about creative writing, scientific discovery, Machines don't make scientific discoveries. Do you remember that photograph of the black hole with all those people that worked on it and collaborated? And of course they used technology and AIs and all that stuff, but it was the people that made the scientific discoveries. Entrepreneurship, there has never been a better time to be an entrepreneur. Machines don't come up with new business ventures or new opportunities. Yes, we work with machines to do that, but creative endeavors is something that's uniquely human. Social interactions, we're going to see some of that later, aren't we? What happens in Helsinki stays in Helsinki. Emotional intelligence. Teaching. You're not going to replace teachers with AI. Sorry, it's not going to happen. Counseling. Anything that requires human interaction. And in fact, we're going to need more of that. Mobility and dexterity. Millennia of climbing mountains, walking, swimming, dancing, playing has made us incredibly dexterous and mobile and very adaptable to a variety of situations and scenarios. I can do this, I can do this, I can make you coffee, I can go swimming, I can dance. Well, actually, I can't, I'm useless, but hey, I can try. Now, but the mobility and dexterity one always gets people. They go, yeah, but Graham, what about that Boston Dynamics robot? Well, I worked with that thing. You move that chair by a centimeter, it falls over. Let me show you.
Now, everything doesn't go exactly the way it's supposed to.
Of course, the last one's a spoof, just to keep you awake. Do you know what I mean? Now, look, obviously, these machines are going to get better. They're going to get better at single task type things. So all the kind of, the sort of app economy, the Amazons and all that kind of stuff. I mean, look, the Uber driver is going to be replaced by a machine. The person that works in the warehouse getting your stuff to put it in an Amazon box is going to be replaced by a machine. I get all that, and that's a good thing, because those jobs suck. And I'm not making a comment on the people that do them. What I want is to have a different economy that allows them to meet their own human potential. So that's going to happen. But mobility, dexterity is something, the kind of things that we can do is very special. So I want to talk about Generation Z briefly. Health-obsessed, alcohol avoiders and everything else. I would question and ask whether this is the most important generation of all time. Why? Because there's going to be 2.5 billion of them, the largest consumer group of all time, connected 9 to 24-year-olds. And I fear that if they don't get this right, sorry, it's my timer. If they don't get this right, they might be the last. The question is whether we'll make it into the 22nd century. And we've got to be thinking about education. We've got to be thinking about not just 21st century competencies. Because if you're in school now, it's the only century you've ever known. We've got to be thinking about the competencies that are going to let us thrive into the next century. Otherwise, it's over. So I think this generation, if we don't get this generation right, if we don't allow this generation to get it right, if we don't help them get it right, I think we're in lots of trouble. But this weekend, just a couple of days ago, I was in London with my daughter in the house, outside the Houses of Parliament. I know loads of other kids are on strike as well. And I'm optimistic. I think, we need more Greta Thunbergs, don't we? Rather than kids, taking endless selfies, expecting to turn into a flower. How do we design then an education system that equips learners with the knowledge and skills to thrive in this rapidly transforming world? Okay, if you could just answer that for me, then we're done. Okay, I don't know. Here's some ideas, though. So we go back in time. We go back to Frederick Froebel, the widely credited, a couple of hundred years ago, German guy, the inventor of the kindergarten. And at the time, of course, schools in those days were very much, I've got the book, the sacred text. You sit in rows because you don't have the sacred text. I read you the sacred text and you take careful notes. So then you have a copy of the sacred text. In fact, the word lecture comes from reading, which is reading the book. That's where it came from. That's how we designed our schools. There's more detail than that. I'm being simplistic, but that's where it comes from. And so we have that idea of scarcity of stuff. But Froebel created, obviously not just a kindergarten, but Froebel's gifts. You know, wooden blocks, those little tangram things. Yeah, got me, good. What he was saying is that if we learn through doing, if we learn through creating, if we learn through making, that's a better way of learning in terms of just being a happier person, but also more successful in life, perhaps. That was his idea, Froebel's gifts. And all of you would have, at some point, had that experience. And that was the originator of the kindergarten. But as my friend Mitch Resnick from Lifelong Kindergarten at MIT says, little did he know at the time that he was creating an education system that was fit for 21st century learners. What do we mean by that? So again, back to my friend Mitch. But you'll recognize this because this is what you just did. I said, make a duck. So you imagined a duck. You then created. Then you played. Some of you played. By play, I meant iterated. You know, we talked about failure. Not failure, iteration. Find out what works. Oh, that didn't work. Try again. That's what you did. I was watching you. You were iterating. You were playing. And you were even talking to each other and playing with each other, which is great, because that's share, isn't it? Because when you share, you get critical feedback. It's important. That's the social aspect of learning. And then, you know, some of you sort of don't like that duck. Change it, yeah? And then you imagine again, and you go round and round and round, and you think about all the things that you do in life, in your adult life. It's that creative learning spiral, isn't it? How we fix things, how we make things. You know, whether we're fixing the vacuum cleaner or making something in our garden or anything that we do, a new job. We do a lot of that. We're doing less, we're not doing enough of that, unfortunately, within our education systems globally. I think Finland's way ahead, but I still think that we're not embracing this notion, this very human way of learning. And so this other form, so I suppose a different to instructionism, is this notion of constructionism. Came from a gentleman called Seymour Papert, one of my early mentors. I got to spend some time with him when I was a young man. He's no longer with us, rest in peace. But he was a student of Piaget. And so constructionism comes from constructivism, this idea of learning by doing, experiential learning. But Papert took it one step further and said to create an artifact, to make something at the end. And by making something, you automatically de-silo your educational curriculum. So if you're making, for example, a musical instrument, say an electronic musical instrument, you know, you'll learn about science and technology and engineering and arts and maths, all that STEAM stuff that we hear about. But STEAM is about interdisciplinary and de-siloing. And so and I'm not saying only constructionism any more than I'm saying only instruction. You know, you combine these things, and good teachers, of course, do that. So it's learning as a reconstruction of knowledge, creating new knowledge, rather than just a transmission. And to break that down a little bit, you could look at it like this. And of course, it's much more nuanced than this. So on the left there, we're seeing what's kind of happened, haven't we, since the 1960s and the introduction of computers, is that certain people would have a reductionist idea of what teaching and learning is. They'll say, well, okay, if teaching is instruction, we'll use computers to do that, and it'll be a better education. Job done. Now, there are still people in Silicon Valley that believe that's true. I mean, look at all those MOOCs that came out. Yes, you know, learning, isolated learning on your own. It's not good. An alternative is, say, we could use technology to give people good things to do, good things to make, and then learning much better than they could before by creating something. You know, had we applied our quadratic equation, for example, some of you might remember what it was and what you did with it. But you didn't. We just left it there. You didn't need to. You just had to remember it for a test. And then, it's gone. And also we think about, you know, historically, some of us are old enough, I am, to remember this title. Do you remember the title Instructional Designer? Yeah, a lot of people are employed in instructional design, especially the corporate sector. And there's nothing wrong with instructional design, and I think it's, again, this is nuanced, and I'm being very simplistic here, but there's this difference between, instructional design is about improving instruction. Learning experience design, because we have more capability, more platforms to use now, allows us to, it's about improving learning. So there's technology to improve teaching or technology to improve learning, and it's knowing when to use each one. Instructional design tends to be content and delivery focused. Get this into your head and then test it. So consumption, I'm drawing it down, I'm consuming it, I'm not creating it. LMS, we've all, LMSs were going to solve education, weren't they? Terrible things, my opinion. Learning experience design is more project-based learning. I mean, I described a project earlier, in the case of making a musical instrument, for example, but it could be anything that you're passionate about. This reconstruction of knowledge. So I'm going to come to a close over the next couple of slides, if you're pleased to know, because then it's the drinks. So when we what can we do when we think about project-based learning? Well, there's these 4 Ps of practice. And I'm stealing this from Mitch again. Give Ps a chance. I know, thank you. But this idea of projects, using projects to de-silo. And this can be in universities, it can be in the workplace, it can be at home, schools, projects. But the projects have to be something that you're passionate about. But also when you're determining what that is, you don't want it to be so broad that it could be anything or so narrow. I'm talking about designing for education now. But a project has to be something that you're excited about. Because if you're excited about it, you'll learn better. And there's lots of research and evidence to back all this up. I'm not, this isn't some fancy that I'm coming up. This is quite old, actually. This goes back 200 years. Peers. Working together. It's fun, isn't it? Sometimes you want to have a bit of me time. But it's fun. Today, we've been going off in groups and workshops and everything else, and we're going to be doing that later. Peers, working together, collaborating. Because remember, we're developing 21st century and 22nd century competencies or enterprise skills. I mean, you can call them soft skills if you like, but I think enterprise skills sums it up better. And play. By play, yes, of course, I mean fun, and playfulness, but what I really mean is play means iterating, changing, what works, what doesn't work, going around, having that iteration cycle. And that's what we actually mean by failure. We don't mean failure as in, duh. We mean trying it again, realizing that failure is part of iteration. Of course it is. No failure, no innovation. So 4 Ps of practice, and we're designing education, designing learning experiences. And when we think about what do we need to thrive, we can think about these 3 frameworks. Now, of course, there are many more frameworks for thinking. I mean, we have, for the last century, been really locked in the scientific method, which is fine for lots of things. But let's think about these other frameworks for thinking. Creative thinking, which is what we were doing earlier. Critical thinking, where hopefully you're sitting there thinking, you know what, I agree with that, but I don't agree with that. Because my self-esteem doesn't depend on being right. And I think, there will be things you disagree with, and that's good, it's constructive. It will teach me better. Computational thinking, and I'm not talking about coding. This fancy that if you want your children to thrive, just teach them how to code. Trust me, 5-year-olds going into education right now won't be coding when they leave school or university. Machine learning will take care of that stuff. If I'm building a website, I'll use Squarespace. It's a doddle. And I do know HTML and CSS and all that stuff. I was teaching kids modular 2 years ago. It's just easier to do that. But the computational thinking allows you to work with machines, to understand machines. And we will work. There's nothing, let's not be frightened of robots and AI. Let's embrace them. But let's understand them. Otherwise, we won't know whether to turn right or to turn left. We won't know what's true and what isn't true. That's why computational thinking. And the nice thing about these 3 frameworks is you can mash them up. You can mash up creative and critical, and you get design thinking. You can mash up critical and computational, get scientific thinking. These are the things that we want to think about in terms of all learners of all age, workforce, school, and so forth. And when we think about using technology to support learning, we might want to think about this. And again, I'm stealing from Seymour Papert here, who said when you're designing something, designing an experience, you need to think in these terms. Low floors to make it easy to make progress. You know, when you're playing a video game, anyone any video game players here? Just a few over here? You see, honestly, none of you play video games? Serious? Okay. But the low floors, it's like with the video game, you want to be able to make some progress initially, right? Otherwise, it's too complicated. But at the same time, you don't want it to be too easy all the time. So you also want high ceilings so you can get super, super sophisticated. Now, I was gifted with what's now known as a spectrum, sort of high functioning ASD. That didn't work terribly well at school because there were some things that really got obsessed, and I used to want to take deep dives into them. And that's what I mean by high ceilings, allowing whatever project to be very sophisticated and difficult. Because what happens is, and you'll experience this yourself, is that you get into a flow state called hard fun, where it's a gnarly problem that you're trying to fix, but you'll stay up all night doing it because you love it. Anyone done that? Or is it just me? Thank you. Phew. And then wide walls. When you're determining a learning experience, wide walls means that it's, that you can make a musical instrument, but you guys might want to make some autonomous robot, and you guys want to make a hydroponic garden because you want to get blasted on tomatoes. See what I did there? So those wide walls. And my last one on here is personalization. And there's a reason why person is in there. Because this isn't something that a computer can do. And you'll hear this all the time. You walk around in computer EdTech. I'm not against EdTech, but you walk around EdTech shows and they'll personalize learning because they've seen Amazon recommendation engines and all that kind of stuff. Now, AIs and computers do have a place in this, but the very best they can do is computer adaptive algorithms. It's that kid on the conveyor belt. It's like, yes, I can let you take lots of different routes as long as you get to the same destination, but we don't want the same destination anymore. Back to the duck. We want lots of different destinations, and that's the thing. Personalization, high quality teaching. The opening speaker this morning, high quality teaching, absolutely, damn right. And that costs money, it costs investment, but we need it more than any time in human history because we need people who understand the social aspects of learning, who understand me or you or whatever, and an AI cannot do that, does not know enough about you. Now, the privacy issues around having that data are so complex that it may not happen. So personalization is a way of giving learners more choice and control over the learning process. And I just want to finish with this one quote from my friend Seymour Papert, my late friend, when he was asked about the role of the teacher, and he said, the role of the teacher is to create the conditions for invention rather than ready-made knowledge. And I'm totally down with that. Thank you so much for listening to me. Thank you.
Wow, 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 wow. Beautiful. Wow. Thank you so much. Imagine him trespassing education, technology, entertainment, and all the stuff, research 30 years in practice.
Oh, no.
And so
10.
playful.
I'm not that old.
So thank you so much. We'll just have question time now. So anyone, we have microphones around.
And I'm going to be around for the drinks, obviously,
Yeah.
so you can,
So any thoughts, comments? Anyone got, yes?
Hello there.
And there's a...
Is there a microphone?
They're here, sorry.
Oh,
yeah. Sorry, they're both here. You just have to turn it on.
Oh.
Yes.
Okay, turn it on. I'm not sure how that works. I think it's...
Here you go.
I don't know.
I got it from his
Thank you.
hand. I won't wash my hands now. Fantastic presentation. I'm sure I speak for many here, but so thank you very much. My main question to you is, what do you think or what do you fear would have happened if you hadn't been homeschooled? You must have been thinking about this and received this question several times. It would be really interesting to hear, because we appreciate you the way you are right now, But in a worst case scenario, bluntly, you're in Finland now, we're blunt. So no, what might have happened otherwise or not happened?
I'm from Southeast London. You won't get blunter than that. No, it's a really interesting point. You know, my biggest break in life was being born white and male. Because if I'd have been born a different color, if I'd have been born a female, I don't think I'd have had the same outcome. And I'm not saying that as a political point, it's just a fact. It's interesting because, without getting into too much detail, I have 4 children and one of them is very similar to me. And I see the daily challenges that she has with the education system. And it's interesting, you know, watching that, you know, when you have children, you sort of start understanding more about your own childhood and seeing how she struggles daily with a curriculum that is really, you know, I mean, trying to force her into this what is an arbitrary normal. Now, there's a gentleman called Todd Rose who wrote a book called The End of Average, which, if you haven't read it, please buy it. It's really worth reading. Todd Rose talks about this idea that average is a sort of statistical myth. Now, he uses an example, and I'll try and quote it very quickly, of back when we went from propeller-based fighter planes, like, you know, Spitfires and all those kinds of things, to jet fighter planes, the early ones. And when they were testing these early jet fighters, test pilots were dying. They were having accidents. And they were trying to work out what was happening here with this. Why are so many people dying? And then somebody from outside of the plane industry came along and go, could it be the seat? And of course the engineers go, how could it be the seat? We measured 1,000 jet fighter pilots, arm length, distance to the eyes, shoulders, fingers, everything. And we built the seat that was the exact average. Guess how many pilots that seat fitted? None. And we have education systems designed like that. So my fear would be that I would have been chemically adjusted to fit into an arbitrary normal. You know, maybe some Ritalin, maybe some Duloxetine, maybe some other kind of chemical to make me just pay attention and maybe get through some of those things. I think that's an outcome that's happening today. I think the other thing is I think that we are missing a lot of cognitive capacity. We're missing out on, you know, we're having an education which is trying to create this arbitrary normal, not just in schools, but institutionalized. I mean, it's, even Illich wrote on this institutionalization of people throughout the workplace and throughout schools and everything else. This idea of trying to create people that become institutionalized. I think that is a problem, and we're seeing, you know, increased levels of mental health, of mental illness. And I think this is a result of us all of us, trying to fit into an arbitrary normal. And that's a result of the second industrial revolution. This idea of society is creating a lot of standardization. And of course, we fight against that because none of us, who in here is standard? Who in here is average? Of course not. Do you know anyone that's average? Of course not. Some of them said yes then. but you understand my point. So my fear is, it would have made me unwell. My fear for my child is it would make them unwell. You know, particularly for girls, because girls present in a very different way. And we are in a medical system which mitigates against females. And I'm not saying that, again, this is not a political point, I'm just saying it because it's a fact. So I think that's the problem. That's what I fear. My fear would be medicated or institutionalized. Sorry, long answer, but good question.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Yeah, we have it here.
Thank you very much, and thank you for a very inspirational contribution. My question would be, how would you, so today we've spoken a lot about education, but also a lot about learning as well as learning in the workplace. Could you say a bit about how you would apply your thinking about learning on workplace learning? Is that less at risk maybe, or is that Is there more possible in the workplace because it's more practical?
Fabulous question, thank you. So just a couple of weeks ago, as it happened, I was giving a talk to 600 learning and development leaders, so all from corporate, big corporations and so forth. And I have to say I was a bit nervous about it really, because it's a bit outside my comfort zone. But I was introducing them to the idea of project-based learning and constructionism and so forth. And it was interesting because it resonated, because they're sitting there thinking, you know, but we just do LMSs. We want everyone to create the same cupcake. But then I pointed out that actually all call center workers are going to be replaced by AIs. So those script-based things, and that's going to happen the next 10, 15 years. I mean, it's already happening. I mean, there's sometimes you're talking to what you think is a person, it's not. So that's already happening. I mean, you know, a whole bunch of tech companies are doing that. So the issue for them, for the workplace, was, look, if you're doing something which is basically about memorization and so forth, you have to remember that the length of time that employee is going to be working for you is short. What are you going to do to develop? What other parts of your business are necessary? So I think there is actually a massive opportunity. It's an untapped opportunity in the workplace, which is to have this transition, because the workplace learning is still locked into this instructional design. And I think that there's a very risk. How you apply project-based learning to corporations, I don't know, but I'm going to start playing with that, because I think it's an interesting model. Because what we do need, and I've done a number, you know, part of my practice is working with large corporations and parachuting into C-suite teams and so forth. And I did one project with a very, very large financial institute. Don't judge me. But I looked at the CVs of 40 of their fast track, this is the most senior people, they flew us all to this place, and I looked at these resumes. And they were all of them had degrees from Russell Group or Ivy League, I mean, like top universities. All of them had proper MBAs from really top, you know, like Harvard and you know, like really INSEAD, you know, really. And I'm looking at this and I'm going, oh, why the hell have they booked me? I was intimidated. And then my friend said to me, well, it's because they don't want their financial services company to become the BlackBerry or Kodak of their industry. Their entire career has been based on certainty. You know, they went to good schools, they went to good universities, they did all the right things, and they passed the tests and everything else. But now we live in a world of uncertainty, and they don't know how to manage uncertainty. And so I spent 3 days with this group, starting with the duck, but then going into all kinds of other areas, because what I had to do is reignite their curiosity, reignite their ability and permission to play, to think outside, to think about innovation, because they didn't think they could innovate. They thought innovation was something they outsourced to, I don't know, some ancient last century manufacturing consultancy like McKinsey. But they could do it themselves, was the point. And that's the thing. So I think there's a lot of potential in this area. It's untapped potential. If I was a gambling person, I'd think, you know what, I'll go for that. But I'm doing bits of that in my practice, but I'm going to expand it more, because the response I got from this group was very good. So I think, yes, I haven't got all the answers, but I think, yes, I think that it's, again, continuous learning or lifelong learning. We have to be able to introduce this. And of course, we're doing a lot of this outside anyway. The question is how do we convince the C-suite, how do we convince the CEO and the shareholders and everything else that having some sort of vision quest over here is actually going to result in greater profitability over here. And I think that conversation needs to be fleshed out.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And you brought a lot of topics home on, you know, through your presentation on social inequality, structural inequality. How do we teach not just the general public, but we have a lot of demographically different people across Europe. And how do we teach who to teach in terms of cultural competencies? We need to have, you know, more women in STEM, more people of different cultural, ethnic backgrounds, religious backgrounds, also represented in the teaching staff. And this is something that is taken to be collectively and discussed. And the last panel, which we had with moderators. Also, thank you for bringing in the diversity and inclusion in everything we do, because we need each other to succeed.
It's a good business model. I mean, it's like, I mean, literally, I mean, it's if you don't have diversity, you don't have innovation. It's that simple. You need other people in the room. Different social backgrounds, different cultural backgrounds, you need that in the room. Otherwise, you're just going to get groupthink. You're going to end up like Kodak or Enron or BlackBerry or you name it. And there's been enough of those.
Yeah, so we don't go there. We want to be inclusive and diverse.
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Pleasure. Woohoo! Wow. Well, that was worth the wait, right? I mean, seriously, you blew our minds. Wow. So now I'll just wrap up and build up your appetite for a tapas and wine, which will be when you go out, you'll get the jackets, and it's on a Holiday Inn lobby. It's booked. Oh, it's not here? It's right here. Okay, so it's right here. Ah, okay, got it. Yes. Thank you. So anyway, you'll find where all the people are, right? So basically, this event, just to summarize, it brought almost 500 people to discuss on European level what are the future needs, what are the future skills, how do we teach, and what is the way for us to navigate as adults through the uncertainty and changing job market, and what are we doing for the generation of the future Europe 2030. We had 21 representatives on different panel discussions, so thank you to all panelists for taking the time to be with us, from companies, from staffing to presidents of unions, companies. We had European Commission perspective. We had youth unions and a lot of civic organizations representing rectors, universities, and also the Innovation Fund, which also promoted and facilitated the discussions. What we also wanted to reach is the topics that how do we cooperate? We had 5 sectors represented today, mostly from the academia, business, civics, students, and the government, of course. And what is the topics that we really discussed is, I started talking about happiness. Why is Finland the happiest country in the world? We said that it was about equality and talking level. And then we started talking on our local, national, European identity and how we can share our privilege with 513 million Europeans here. And how to basically live a life worth living, to bring in the human aspect to our digitalization topics while we promote and reskill in the ongoing changes. And what was the book we suggested? So the book that Graham Norton suggested was End at Average. I kind of think that it would be nice to Google that, to study more. And to cooperate we need each other to cooperate. That my story as an immigrant, as an international student, is not just a one-off. I want to have millions of us to succeed, regardless where we come from, regardless who we are, or which postcode we have. So if you feel that you've learned something, please raise your hand. Do you feel that you could be a change maker, role model for someone so you could all inspire others? Great. So that's my message to you, the message from the organizers, to say that something that one person, as Greta Thunberg, she started alone sitting in front of Swedish Parliament, and she gathered 4 million last Friday. So I encourage you to be that person in your department, in your school, in your company, because together we can make this change happen. Because we saw Helsinki's education mayor, Pia Pakarinen, she said, we need 6,000 young people every year. And this is the problem already now. So I want to quote Gandhi. You may never know what results come of your actions, but if you do nothing, there will be no results. So do something today. Thank you so much. And thank you all for watching. So tweet after your thoughts on HEL we can, and now let's go mingle and continue our discussions in the lobby. Thank you very much.